Well, welcome to 5 Live Daily, Prime Minister. I'm delighted to be hosting your first sit-down broadcast interview about the general election and your hopes for the future of your premiership on the very day, a year ago, since you became Prime Minister.
Well, indeed, I'm very pleased to be joining you.
Well, let's start with the general election before we get on to the future plans. It started so well. All the talk was about how much you were going to win by, how big that extra majority could be. When did you first have an inkling it might not be going according to plan?
Well, I think as the campaign was going on, I realised that everything wasn't going perfectly, but throughout the whole campaign, the expectation still was that the result would be a different one, a better one for us than it was. We didn't see the result that came coming, and if I'm honest, I've heard stories about quite a few Labour MPs who actually didn't think they were going to keep their seats and ended up keeping those seats. So when the result came through, it was a complete shock.
A complete shock. When was that moment for you, though, of realisation?
Well, it was when I heard the exit poll. To be honest with you, I didn't actually watch the exit poll myself. I had a little bit of superstition about things like that. My husband watched it for me and came and told me. And I was shocked at the result that had come through in the exit poll. It took a few minutes for it to sort of sink in what that was telling me. My husband gave me a hug. And then I got on the phone to CCHQ, to the Conservative Party, to find out what had happened.
That must have been a moment for Philip to tell you that. It must have been quite hard for him.
Yes, it was. But you know, he's as you know, he's been a huge support for me over the years. And there are times when I perhaps get him to read a newspaper article for me and tell me what it says rather than reading it directly.
And when you had that hug, did you have a cry? How did you feel?
Well, I felt, I suppose, devastated really, because as I say, I knew the campaign wasn't going perfectly, but still the messages I was getting from people I was speaking to, but also the comments we were getting back from a lot of people that were being passed on to me, were that we were going to get a better result than we did.
Devastated enough to shed a tear?
Yes, a little tear.
Yes. At that moment, that private moment.
At that moment, yes.
And then you obviously have to just brush yourself down.
You have a responsibility. You're a human being. You've been through that experience. But I was, there as leader of the party and Prime Minister, and I had a responsibility then to, as we went through the night, to determine what we were going to do the next morning.
And in those moments, if I may, you're somebody who talks a lot about duty. You're very aware of your role as a public servant. You also say you want to do the right thing. And we have seen of late when politicians have said, this is what I want to achieve, and then they don't, they step down. Was there any moment where you thought it might be the right thing for me to step down because I said I needed to increase my majority?
No, I didn't consider stepping down because I felt that there was a responsibility there to ensure that the country still had a government. Now, I was going through that night, I was seeing really good colleagues who I'd worked with who were losing their seats. And that, again, I'll use the word devastating because it is pretty devastating. It's very distressing when you see people that you know have done a good job lose their seats. And, I called the election, I led the campaign, and I take responsibility for what happened. But there's also a responsibility for the future, for the country. And that was about ensuring that the country had a government. And we were the biggest party. We'd won more votes than the Labour Party, more seats than the Labour Party, higher percentage share of the vote. And we were the only party that was capable of forming that government. And I felt it was our responsibility to do that.
Was there anybody that you were most embarrassed to face in your moment of devastation?
Well, I don't think there was any one person that I felt I was most embarrassed to face. I felt...
The British people?
As I say, the result was a shock, but I think once you've sort of taken that on board, once you've recognised what has been happening, you then have to ask what's going to be right for the British people for the future,
but
in terms of having
on a human
having
level,
a government.
as you say, you have to stand outside. We're in your office now. You have to stand outside this building. And it was quite striking in your speech. You didn't acknowledge, it seemed at all, the result. You said, this is what I've got to do. these are the next steps. Do you regret not acknowledging the result there? Because social media was just awash with saying, has the Prime Minister not seen what happened?
Well, at that point in time, I felt what was important was giving people the confidence of knowing that there was going to be a government that was going to be getting down to work and dealing with the issues that they face in their day-to-day lives and that they want government to help them with.
But not a little bit of humility at that point?
Well, I think it's important that as a government, that I as Prime Minister and we as a government show humility through listen to the message that we got from people from the election, take that on board and respond to that in the way that, in the sort of issues we deal with. A couple of the issues that I think very clearly came through to me during the election campaign was the concern that young people had about housing. A lot of young people thinking, were they ever going to get on the housing ladder, ever going to be able to have a place that they could call their own?
Yes, I mean, you have said if I may push it like this, your regrets about the campaign is that your vision, which we'll come on to, didn't sufficiently come through enough. You didn't boast enough of Tory economic success, bang the drum, or deliver, as you say, a positive enough message perhaps for young people on some of those issues. But Prime Minister, it was your general election campaign. So how did you let that happen?
Well, as we were going through the campaign, I mean, I think the issue was there were things that I was saying that were being said about some of these aspects, like the future opportunity. But looking back on the campaign, I realise now and regret that we weren't making more of that we weren't doing more to get that message across. Because I think there is huge opportunity for our country.
But couldn't you have stopped? So just on that point, you regret not doing more, but you're in charge, and that's a sign of leadership. You see some things going this way, you say, excuse me, team, my name's all over this. It was very much the Theresa May campaign, deliberately so. How could you let your campaign be derailed like that?
But I think it's not about a campaign being derailed in a sense. It's about the fact that there are balances of messages within a campaign. But it's also, as I was saying earlier, I knew it wasn't going perfect. No campaign goes perfectly, if you like, but I knew it wasn't going perfectly. But it wasn't the case that there was a point in time where it was sort of suddenly, oh, we've got to change direction in this campaign or do this in the campaign rather than what we were doing previously.
Did you feel
just when it came to the actual result, there were a lot of people within the party who'd been very close to the campaign who were genuinely shocked by the result that came through.
And doesn't that just say you're out of touch?
Well, I think that actually we didn't see it coming. I don't think many people in the Labour Party saw it coming.
But the British people felt that they didn't want to vote for you in the overwhelming landslide numbers you'd hoped for, which is why you'd called the election.
Well, I had called the election, and I don't regret calling it. I think it was the right thing to do at the time. I'd called it because of concerns about how we were going to go forward, particularly on Brexit. And yes, but if you look at the result, there were, we took seats that the Conservative Party have never held before.
That's not my
like
question.
Mansfield.
I still don't understand how, as a strong and stable, to use your phrase, a strong and stable leader lost control of her campaign to such an extent you didn't read the national mood and you ended up with a hung parliament. I don't understand how that happened.
Well, it's not a question of losing control of a campaign.
So what happened?
It's a question of a campaign being set and
by
messages being given through that campaign. And as I say, what happens during a campaign when you're in a political party, obviously you get responses back from the ground and people that you're looking at what the results are showing you. And the message that I was getting was still right through to the end that this was going to be a different result from the one that we got. And what we saw some things happening in this campaign. We saw a lot of people voting who'd never voted before. Now, I want to see people voting. I think it's important for people to take part in our democracy. What I'm saying is, looking back on the campaign now, I feel that what I regret is that we didn't get across more of the message of the sort of vision that I set out when I became Prime Minister. As you said, a year ago, I stood on the steps of Downing Street. I set out the values that would drive us as a government,
which we will come
dealing
on to.
with injustice.
We will come on to that, Prime Minister. But just so what I'm trying to say here is, You had no idea this was going to go like this. You've explained how the campaign works. Why should people feel confident that you're any good at reading the mood music of a room, especially when you go to Brussels to do that deal, on the basis that you had no idea that your campaign wasn't going well?
Well, look, what I've said was that I knew that the campaign wasn't going perfectly. So I'm not sitting here and saying...
It's rather more dramatic than that.
I'm not sitting here and saying this was everything was going so swimmingly and so forth. I knew that it wasn't a perfect campaign. But what I also knew was that I was doing the job that I thought was important at the time, which was talking to people about the challenges that the country faces and talking to people about the decisions we needed to take in order to deal with those challenges. And now, what I believe it's important for us as a government to do, of course, is to listen to the messages of the campaign. I think, I've mentioned housing, I think that was one of the issues. It became clear during the campaign and subsequently that a lot of young people were very concerned about that. I think issues around schools were another area where a lot of parents were concerned about ensuring that their children were going to be able to be guaranteed that good quality education to give them that step up in life for the future. You know?
So you learned to remember things beyond Brexit. We'll come on to Brexit in just a moment. I must ask, did you feel in any way an extra pressure not to step down because you're only the second woman to hold this office of Prime Minister? Did that play a role?
No, I can honestly say it didn't. I mean, what I looked at was I believed was important for the country, was getting a government. We were the largest party. I think we had a responsibility. And I think I had a responsibility as leader of the party and as Prime Minister. You know, it's in a sense, it can be easy sometimes if something like this happens, just to walk away and to leave somebody else to deal with it. But what I've...
Just like David Cameron.
Well, what I've said to my colleagues is that I thought it was important, you know, I've got us into this and
yes,
I'm going to work to get us out.
Prime Minister, are you a feminist?
I have said yes before. Yes, I've said that I'm a feminist in that I believe that it's important that women genuinely have equal opportunities.
Yes, you even wore a T-shirt saying that about 11 years ago, if my calculation is correct. It was interesting because in a recent interview in Vogue, you sort of seemed to avoid that question. But why do you think then that young women, if you're talking a lot about the future, didn't vote for you? 73% of women aged 18 to 24 voted for a 68-year-old man in the form of Jeremy Corbyn. Why don't they see you as their hope, as their leader?
Well, I think what I would hope when people are looking at what they're voting for is that they don't look as whether they're... This is one of the things that I've been involved in during my political career, is trying to ensure that we get more women into Parliament.
Yes.
But on the basis that I don't want people to think, oh, I'm going to vote for a woman or I'm going to vote for a man when they look at these things.
You could. If you don't see somebody doing the role, though, you don't necessarily believe it's possible, and it can be very inspirational.
It can be very inspirational, and there's lots of, you know, when I became Prime Minister, I had a lovely story of a friend whose little 6-year-old daughter sort of said, "Oh, Mummy, I didn't realise a girl could do that job," and so it's hopefully that does give her.
If she'd got to 18, the stats show she would have voted for Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, and let's think about some of the issues. As I've said, I think for some young people, there were issues. Obviously, I think for a lot of students, there were issues around the question of their fees and university education, and the fact that
Jeremy Corbyn was saying we'll abolish tuition fees.
At a cost of £100 billion, which was unaffordable.
And yet you gave £1 billion to the DUP. I mean, it must be very difficult for a feminist to do a deal with a party that is anti-abortion, anti-equality in terms of marriage. I mean, that must have stuck in the throat a little as a feminist.
The confidence and supply agreement that we've got with the DUP is about ensuring that we can give that extra confidence in relation to government through obviously having a majority here in the House of Commons.
And so you can keep your job.
On the issues that, so that the government, the country can have
yes.
a
But did it, I'm asking something
government.
Slightly different. You have explained that several times in Prime Minister's questions, no less. Did it stick in your throat to do that deal as a feminist?
One of the important things with that deal was that we were very clear that the Conservative Party was not going to row back at all in anything that we've done on the equalities agenda. I'm very proud. I was Minister for Women and Equalities.
Yes, you were.
When we kick-started the process of bringing in the legislation to bring in same-sex marriage.
What you haven't been that clear on, though, is you haven't accounted for where that £1 billion is coming from. It can only come from three places, apart from the magic money tree. Tax rises, extra borrowing, or spending cuts. So which is it, Prime Minister? You can be very clear with all of us, with Five Live listeners.
Actually, there is somewhere else that money comes from, and that's what we've already shown. If you just look at our record on things like the extra money we've put in into the health service, we've been able to do that as the economy has grown. If the economy grows and you're creating that wealth, more money is coming into the government's coffers. That enables you actually to ensure that you've got that money to spend.
The key word is if there, isn't it?
But and that's important.
You've got Brexit staring at you down the barrel of the gun.
That's why it's important that you have a stable government that can deliver and make the decisions necessary. And you say Brexit is coming down. Of course it is. We're going to deliver the vote that people wanted. We're going to deliver the vote that people gave to leave the European Union.
But can you guarantee...
Can I just finish this particular point? But Brexit isn't just a process. It's an opportunity. And that's crucial. And that's about our economy for the future, because it's an opportunity for us to get out there and embrace the world. And I think the world is waiting. That's what I hear from world leaders.
In the short term, do you have a contingency plan for any losses that might make regular people, like my listeners, those ordinary working class families you care about, if they were to be made poorer in the short term, do you have any contingency plans?
Well, we of course look constantly. I mean, every year the government is looking at what it's doing for people. So there's a number of things that, of course, as a government has already been done to try and help people, particularly those who are, as you say, struggling on a day-to-day basis. The introduction of the national living wage, that significantly helped a significant pay rise for the lowest paid people in this country. What we've been doing, and we've committed to continue to raise the personal allowance on tax, that means that people are able to keep more of their own money to spend.
But you would have done that anyway. I'm talking about short-term plans, contingency plans, specifically for becoming poor as a country, perhaps, in the short term, during Brexit and then in the immediate aftermath, if companies, as we've seen, may pull out of the country.
Well, what we've also seen in the aftermath of the referendum result is significant investment being made by companies in this country.
But we haven't Brexited yet.
We haven't Brexited yet, but that's why it's so important that we make sure two things happen. First of all, three things actually. First of all, that we get Brexit right, that we get that good deal with the European Union. Secondly, that we're in the position to do trade deals around the world. And free trade is very important. It brings jobs into the UK. We need to be doing that, and we're talking to America, talking to India, talking to Australia, talking to other countries about what we can do when we leave the European Union. And then the other thing we need to do, and this is it's also helping people who may be worried about their children's future, worried about whether they're going to be able to have jobs in the world of work of the future, is ensuring that we're getting our boosts to industry here in the UK, and that we're skilling people up. And what we want to do on technical education for young people is ensuring that they've got the skills to actually do the jobs of the future, because the world of work is going to be changing.
So no specific contingency plans, but plans to look after those people in a general sense. You have to get Brexit through the Commons. Can you guarantee you'll get the numbers that you personally are able, with the political nous, to do the necessary deals to get Brexit through the Commons?
Well, the first thing about getting Brexit through the Commons is to get a good Brexit deal from the European Union.
But you can't do it without the Commons. So can you guarantee that you can get it through?
We have, you talked about the arrangement we have with the DUP. Very clear that within that they will support the government on the necessary Brexit legislation. But I don't just want that. What I want to do is to get a good deal from the European Union. And I would hope that people across the House of Commons, regardless of party, will see the importance of that deal for the future of Britain, will see that it's a deal that delivers on what the British people voted for, and will see that this is an opportunity to make a success and to, as I say, embrace opportunities around the world.
You hope. So you can't guarantee it at this stage.
But that's what politics is about. What politics is about putting that proposition to people and explaining why we think it's the right deal,
and
why we
them
think
with
it's
you.
important, and taking them with us.
Which you didn't do in the general election with the British people to the level that you needed to get that majority that you dreamt of on these very steps.
We didn't do it to the level that I'd hoped to do it, as I say, to the level that I'd expected to do it. But of course, we did get a higher percentage share of the vote than we have done for something like 25 years.
The people that you're talking about that you'll have to convince, one of them is Jeremy Corbyn. Your campaign was very critical of him on a personal level. There were attack ads. I saw them on Facebook. They went out across social media. Just to quote, your ads and your name said, voting for Corbyn was too big a risk to take. He has poor judgment, to name one quote. And this week, you've made a direct appeal to him and other opposition MPs to contribute, not just criticise, help clarify and improve your policies. What specifically has caused you to change your mind about Jeremy Corbyn?
No. What I have said that I want to see parties across the House of Commons contributing to what I think are the significant challenges that the country faces. And I think actually one of the messages people were giving us at the general election is that they do want to see us embracing...
They quite like Labour.
No,
that was one of the messages.
That they want to see us embracing a greater consensus. And on Brexit, I mean, that's what we've said. We want to get the biggest possible consensus.
This interview is about getting to know you. It's about my listeners getting to know you, 5 Live listeners getting to know you. On a personal level, have you increased your respect of Jeremy Corbyn after his general election campaign?
Well, after the general election, one of the things that has happened is the terrible terrorist attack that took place in Finsbury Park, which was, of course, in Jeremy Corbyn's constituency. And what I saw there, because Jeremy was there, it happened late at night, he was there and through the night with his constituents. And I went there the next morning, that became clear to me from what people were saying. And I saw a Jeremy Corbyn there who was a good constituency MP working with those people.
I can't end the interview, Prime Minister, talking about Jeremy Corbyn. That just wouldn't seem right. Can we get an insight? You are a big fan of stability. Can you clarify to 5 Live listeners that you will definitely still be around at the end of the Brexit deal and thereafter? Or when are we going to see the end of your office?
Well, I'm getting down to work. I'm getting on with delivering that Brexit deal. What I have what I said to my party is that, look, over the years, I've been involved in politics for a long time. I've been an MP now for 20 years. I started in the Conservative Party stuffing envelopes when I was 12. I wanted to be an MP when I was 12. Shortly afterwards, I started stuffing envelopes for the local Conservative Party.
Quite a journey you've
been on. So
it's
been quite a journey that I've been on. And what's driven me throughout that is a sense of duty, a sense of public service, and of wanting to do the right thing and make a difference, make a change to people's lives. I see still there's a lot that we need to do, and as Prime Minister, I want to get on with that job of changing people's lives for the better and changing our country for the better.
But surely Philip wants to know. Philip, your husband, who's given you this big hug and he's seen you through all of this, he wants to know if you're going to be here till 2022, doesn't he?
What Philip wants me to do, I think, is to carry on doing what I believe to be the right thing for people in this country. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm
not getting a date, I understand that. But just say to me now, sitting here in this office, you have been on a long journey to get to this point. What would you say to your younger self?
Oh gosh, this is one of those, what would I write if I was to a 16-year-old Theresa May?
Theresa May, who's always been interested in politics as far as I can see.
I think what I would write to my younger self is believe in yourself, always do the right thing, and work hard to tackle injustice when you see it.
Prime Minister, thank you very much for talking to me and to 5 Live listeners.
Thank you.